hear myself on the radio? That'd be fantastic. So we recorded a demo for the show, gave it to his bosses, and his bosses were like, nobody wants to listen to people talk on the radio anymore. And so it died there, just like how years ago things died when you couldn't get past a gatekeeper.
Levels would be outdated, of course, before anyone started. Then on the page, too sincere, clearly regret, backward, wait, naive, anachronistic. Maybe that'll be the point. Maybe that's why they need the next real level, as far as I can see, with disapproval.
בוקר טוב, צהריים טובים, אחר צהריים טובים, ערב טוב, לילה טוב, ולפנות בוקר נהדר לכם. אתם מאזינים למשדר רשת, לי קוראים ארז. משדר רשת, פודקאסט בענייני השעה, שזה מה שמעניין אותי בשעה שבה אני מדבר. ובשעה הזאת אני דווקא מעביר את זכות הדיבור למרואיין שלי, שהייתה לי הזכות לראיין אותו ככה לפני מספר ימים. אדם בשם דן לינץ', מהשם ומהצורה שאני הוגה אותה אפשר להבין שהוא לא ישראלי, וכן הרעיון הוא באנגלית, אז אם יש מישהו שלא מבין אנגלית אז צר לי. זה השפה היחידה המשותפת שהצלחנו למצוא, בחור מליברפול באנגליה. הקשר שלי עם דן לינץ' והוא בעצם, אולי לא יודע אם במקצועו, כי במקצועו נראה לי שהוא ואני די באותו מקצוע, טכנולוגיה ופיתוח לווב וכל זה, אבל בתחביבו, בוא נאמר ככה, במקצועו בערבים, הוא פודקאסטר, וזה בעצם החיבור שנוצר ביני לבינו. כמו שאני אוהב להגיד, זאת אומרת, החיבור נוצר ביני לבינו, למרות שהוא לא ממש היה שותף שווה לעניין הזה, כיוון שאני הייתי מאזין שלו בכל מיני פודקאסטים שהוא ניהל, אבל כמו שאתם תשימו לב ברעיון, למעשה דווקא היה פה איזשהו תהליך של תן וכך. הפודקאסט שאני דרכו התוודעתי לדן לינץ' היה פודקאסט שכבר לא איתנו לצערי הרב, ואנחנו מדברים עליו הרבה, זה נקרא Linux Outlaws. זה היה פודקאסט שעסק בעיקר בחדשות על טכנולוגיה, לא רק טכנולוגיה, אבל בעיקר על טכנולוגיה ובעיקר על לינוקס ועל הנושא של open source, כל הנושא של קוד חופשי, שאולי באמת כדאי שאני אקדיש לו איזה משדר או שניים או שלושה ככה בזמן הקרוב, מכיוון שזה נושא שמאוד קרוב לליבי. את הפודקאסט הזה הגישו שניים, אחד דן לינץ' שהוא כאמור אנגלי מליברפול, והשני הוא אדם בשם פייביאן צ'רשל, שהוא גרמני מהנובר כמדומני. והרעיון היה שהיה באמת דיאלוג ביניהם, זה היה פודקאסט, ה-Outlaws לא היה סתם, היה ככה באמת מרשו לעצמם לדבר חופשי, עם כללות וצחוקים באמת, והרבה מאוד מה שמכונה רנט, שזה הבן אדם מתחיל ככה לשפוך טונות של אש וגופרית על נושאים מסוימים, הם נעו ככה בין הגבול של אוקיי, אנחנו אוהבים אופן סורס אבל לא התחתנו, לבין הרעיון הזה של אוקיי, נחרות את הנושא על דגלנו ונצא לקרב. וזה היה פודקאסט שסחב יפה מאוד במשך הרבה מאוד שנים, וכמו שאני גם אומר ברעיון, זה היה הפודקאסט הראשון שחיבר אותי כמאזין למה שנקרא קהילה. זה לא היה סתם פודקאסט שאני מאזין לו, ויצא לי להאזין אז לפודקאסטים לא מעטים של NPR וכזה, ואני לא הגדרתי את עצמי מאזין של NPR. לא הגדרתי את עצמי, חבר בקהילה של הפודקאסט של NPR, This American Life או משהו כזה, וזה היה הפודקאסט הראשון שכן חיבר אותי כמעבר לסתם מאזין, אלא באמת יצר איזשהו קשר, ואכן גם התכתבתי עם האנשים בטוויטר, במיילים, בסיטואציות כאלה ואחרות. לשמחתי הרבה, דן לינץ' המשיך לעסוק בפודקאסטים גם בהמשך. היה לו פודקאסט מעולה שנקרא Red Hole Radio, שבו הוא השמיע מוזיקה כמעט לחלוטין הייתה תחת רישיון של Creative Commons, שזה בעצם אותו רישיון חופשי שאומר, תן לי קרדיט, תעשה מה שאתה רוצה, וזה רישיון מצוין שאני, כמובן כל משדרשת הוא תחת הרישיון הזה, והפודקאסט הזה השמיע הרבה מאוד מוזיקה, שכמו שמי שכבר מכיר את משדרשת יודע שמוזיקה אני מאוד אוהב, אז שוב, נקודת חיבור מצוינת. הוא גם התחיל להגיש, או יותר נכון להשתתף בהגשת פודקאסט שנקרא FLOSS Weekly, שהוא פודקאסט כבר תחת הרשת של טוויט TV, טוויט נטוורק של ליאו לפורט, שזה פודקאסט שעוסק בנושא של פרויקטים של תוכנה חופשית, של קוד חופשי, מכל הסוגים ומכל הדברים, ושוב, הוא תפס שם תפקיד, כלומר, מצד אחד הוא לא כל משדר, אלא אחד לכמה שבועות, אבל הרבה פעמים יוצא לו להחליף דווקא את המגיש, וכל העניין הזה בעצם מראה שהאיש, העשייה שלו מבחינת פודקאסטים, עם כל כמה שזה סוג של תחביב באמת, העשייה שלו היא מאוד מהותית ומעמיקה. בין השאר הוא גם מפיק פודקאסט למה שנקרא Software Freedom Conservancy, שזה ארגון שעוסק בתמיכה, ארגון גג של פרויקטים של קוד חופשי ותוכנה חופשית. זאת אומרת, האיש עוסק בפודקאסטים כמגיש, כעורך, כמפיק, כמגיש אורח או כמגיש מחליף, ובאמת יש לו הרבה מאוד, גם פודקאסטים שהם יותר חדשותיים, יותר מעונבים נקרא לזה, עד כמה שפלוס ויקלי מעונב, ויותר, בואו נאמר ככה, טישרט ושורטס. ועניין אותי מאוד ככה, גם מכיוון שהוא עושה את זה כבר, אנחנו מדברים שם על בערך מ-2007, שזה אומר 12 שנה לפחות. עניין אותי מאוד באמת להסתכל קצת, קבל קצת מהפרספקטיבה שלו על כל הנושא של פודקאסטים, דווקא מהתחום הפחות מקצועי, הפחות עדיין כהובי, עדיין כאנשים שעושים את זה כמוני, כאיזשהו ערוץ לבטא את הקריאטיביות, להפיץ איזשהו משהו. ואני חושב שבהחלט יצא רעיון מאוד מעניין, ואני מקווה שתחשבו כמוני. אנחנו כמובן נתראה בסוף הרעיון לכמה מילות סיום. תהנו.
A while ago, because you've been doing FLOSS Weekly for like ages,
Yeah.
there was a show which for some reason was released without editing.
Ah.
And you could actually hear that thing where you go like, the guy in the studio goes like, okay guys, we're gonna cut this, start as for that, and you go like, yeah, that was very interesting. And I was like, man, we're not supposed to hear that.
Yeah, I'm guessing you're probably not. We have an engineer over in the studio there in Petaluma in California. I'm in the UK, obviously, so it's quite a distance. But we have a guy called John who's been our engineer for our show for as long as I've been on it. He's
Wasn't
really
he called Jonathan once?
There's two. There's a John and there's a
okay.
Jonathan, I believe. But John is our main engineer. John Slanina, I think his name is. And he's great, and he does a great job. But actually, that show you were talking about, it must have been an older one. It's not 10 years, but it's maybe 7, it must be 8 years, maybe 9 years since I started doing FLOSS Weekly. And in that time, it's changed a bit how we do it. So to give everyone the kind of... the little behind the scenes kind of information, which to be honest we talk about on the show anyway now, is we used to do it in this way where we would record the interview. We'd get the guest on, we'd start doing the interview, we'd talk and then finish, do the wrap up and all that, and then we'd go back and record the intro. And Randall used to joke about how that made it look like we knew loads about the subject because we'd just done the interview, and then we could pretend that we went, oh, I hope they mentioned this and I hope they talk about that, you know. And all of a sudden we'd look like we knew what we were talking about. But since then in recent years, I forget how long it's been now, but we've changed it to just doing it like in sequence. So we do the intro, then we bring the guest on, so there's no cheating in that sense anymore. So yeah, it's more just kind of straight to as it should be now, which is, you know, both ways work, but it's cool.
Well, he said that this is the way Leo was doing, so he just continued that when he took over, and it's better. I think it's better because the guest is actually hearing how you guys described his project, and he can say, "Oh, you did a great job here," or "What you missed there."
Oh, you
So
got it wrong.
it's-
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Which they usually don't say. They're very nice.
Mm-hmm.
I think people in open source are usually nice because they have to be, unless they're Linus Torvalds, and well, he's nice too now.
I was going to say he's turned over a new leaf. I've been told. So
Yeah. The last
he's-
bastion of bastardity has been toppled.
yeah, he's changed his kind of approach lately. But yeah, it's good. I think you're right. I think Randall. I think that was the way Leo always did the shows, and
Right.
yeah, and then it just changed later on.
For some reason. Well, first of all, that's the thing. You and I, actually, maybe you and I, well, we go back a long way. And I would say, like, you and I, without knowing each other, but we actually do. I did send a lot of, you used to do a podcast called Linux Outlaws.
Yep.
And I don't even know if you remember, I used to send a lot of emails because I'm a technical guy, and I was always like, "Oh, I can actually write something about this," And you would read my email, and I would go like, "Oh man, I should have maybe said something more profound." So I started writing longer letters with okay, this is what native app means, and this is what mobile means, and that was really because that was the first time. I think I became inside a community. This wasn't just a podcast I was listening to, but a community which I was a member of.
Yeah.
And so was it basically what you were aiming for? Was this the idea of Linux Outlaws? Some sort of broadcasting to your own audience?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's really nice to hear you say that it made you feel part of a community, because that was what we always wanted to do. I think. I mean, that was what I always wanted to do. So I took we used to divide the show into. It's weird. It started off. I used to kind of look through the news. I used to be quite up on the news when it started. This would have been 2007, so it's like 12 years ago now. It's a long time. And I used to be really on top of the news at pretty much. And I would suggest news stories and stuff like that. And then as it went on over time, I really lost track of the news completely. You would hear towards the end, like most weeks, I would just have to go, "So what's this? What is this? What's this about? What are you talking about?" And then Fab would tell me the news. But one thing we did always do was make sure that we read every email that came in. And some of them, I mean, it got more difficult. At start, it was easy because we didn't have that many emails to read because, not that many people had heard the show, so we could read them in more depth. But as it went on, we'd get more and more emails each week, and it became impossible to read them all. But I wanted to make sure that we mentioned everyone. So the big thing I used to do was go through, and even if we didn't read people's email, we would mention their name and say that they'd emailed. So we had a list of people who'd emailed us, and it's really easy. You can just list them off and go, these people emailed us this week. And it was nice because it came from my experience of emailing. Not that much. I did email other shows, not necessarily Linux shows, but other podcasts and things, and I don't think they ever read any of them. And it used to I used to think, is there any point in me sending these? Because you'd wonder if anyone had ever even read them. And it's difficult when you've got a lot of email and you've got other stuff to do to get through it all.
Right.
I understand their side of it, but it was just an easy way to kind of fix that problem, was to say, well, we can at least acknowledge everyone who's emailed us and then even pick bits out. So sometimes we'd get like a 2-page email and I'd pick out like one paragraph that I thought was really interesting, and we'd talk about that. We'd mention that so we could get through them and stuff. But it was good. I mean, that's what we wanted. So it was great to have a kind of community, and in the end, I think it grew quite a lot. So we had an online community in the forums that we had. We tried various different solutions over the years. We had a classic kind of forum, bulletin board style forum. I think it was PHP BB or one of those kind of things. And and then we had other things that we tried over the years. I forget them all now, but I think we ended up on Discord at one point, and we had things like Twitter and Identica and other things. Identica's gone now, but there are other alternatives. So yeah, definitely wanted to try and make people feel like they were part of the show because they were.
And that's the thing. I mean, I would have never sent an email to other podcasts because they would never read them. But I listen, and I know you're reading the emails, so I know you're reading them on the air, so I know you're reading them personally.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, those guys, I didn't send them to be read. That was a bonus, but I knew you guys were reading. So it created this sort of community. And you do the same thing in FLOSS Weekly. You always say we have a chat, we have an IRC channel, we look at them. You used to have an IRC channel on the on Linux Outlaws, and which would have been funny because you would go like Fabs was like, oh, I'm answering something in there, and you can hear his keyboard because he used to have those thing with the switches, the red switches.
The big loud keyboard, yeah.
So it was like and somebody goes and ta 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 ta, and it was very funny.
That actually helped us quite a lot. I mean, that helped us a lot with the live chat room. The thing about that was when we started the show, we never had any way of kind of streaming it live as we were doing it. So we'd get a lot of, if we got something wrong, which we did all the time, we'd get 15 emails telling us the same thing that we'd got wrong over the next week until we could get back on and record another one and release it and say. So it became really good for us because it was, once we were streaming live, we had like Icecast audio stream, and then we had video streams via YouTube later on. But the Icecast stream particularly, and then when we started doing that, we had the chat room. You didn't have to wait a week to get told that something was wrong. You could actually, as you were doing the show, go, oh, so-and-so's just told us in the chat room that this is wrong and we should have said this. And then everybody who was going to write an email often would just go, oh, they've already fixed it. And then it cut down a lot of effort, I think, for a lot of people who wanted to tell us the same things that were wrong. And it gave us even quicker feedback, which was great, like instant feedback.
So I would say in terms of Linux Outlaws, let's call it, I think you've basically ticked all the boxes in podcasting. Let's see, you had a chat room, which was, you had, of course, the podcast. You would do interviews, you would do specials. Occasionally, you would cover some topic. I remember the first time I heard of Bitcoin in a way that made sense was when Fabs actually went and studied the thing. And you did a live podcast, which I remember. Maybe you don't. You had a convention, your own convention.
Yep.
And I'm probably, and of course you finished it, which is also, you actually finished it, not just, stopped updating or something.
Fade
like
out,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So when did you ever came up with a format, or was it just everything, as you say, came together like organically?
I think it probably came together organically. When we started, I mean, this is quite something I've said quite a lot that I'm sure people have heard a lot. I thought that we shouldn't do more than say about 40 to 45 minutes because people wouldn't really want to listen to that much. And the early shows were quite short, I think, maybe half an hour or 40 minutes or so. And then very quickly it got up to an hour, and then it got up to like an hour and a half, and then it was 2 hours, and by the end it could be 2.5 hours for a live session or something, or maybe 3.
I think the running joke was that you were recording into a device that was only able to carry like 2 hours and 40 minutes or something like that.
Yeah.
So you kept like, okay, we have to end because I'm running out of, because like we're gonna be cut out.
I was always worried about running out of recording space. But we, as far as like a structure goes, we did have show notes. So right from the start we had notes that were really just bullet points of stuff to talk about. We didn't have anything more complicated than that. And as it went on.
Yeah, so were you discussing stuff beforehand, or were you just, meeting once a week or two, chatting up, and that's it?
That was it, really. We really just kind of got on with it and did everything live. I mean, we had shared notes like through. I think we mostly used Google Docs towards the end, or we had various different solutions. We had was it typepad? No, we had a shared notepad. We tried
Etherpad or something like that.
Yeah, it could have been that. We tried a few different things over the years, and we ended up on Google Docs, I think, in the end, because it was just easy for us both to edit stuff on there. And each week, so during what we would do normally is, like, if we had a show set for, say, tonight, say, like, it's Monday and we've got a show tonight or whatever, and I'd get a message off Fab saying, are we doing the show tonight? And I'd say yes, and then he'd say, right, I'll sort the news out. and I'd go and sort the email out, and I'd spend a couple of hours going through the emails and putting them in, sorting them out, and as we were both doing it, you'd see the notes would fill out, and then we did have. I was always really keen on. So it's quite funny. We were interested. It's interesting that we had kind of different philosophies, but it kind of worked in a way. I always wanted to do little music bits and have in between sections. We did do that, but I was always keen to have like little sections that we could, segments on the show where we'd have a little theme tune for it and all this kind of stuff. And I think, Fab liked that too, but I think he was kind of keen to just keep going through and ploughing into one big discussion, which we did anyway. But we try and keep all the different sections. But we definitely had a structure towards the end, but it really wasn't scripted in any way. We used to get emails of people or messages of people saying that it was really well scripted, and we used to laugh because we didn't.
Yeah,
as if we were reading our lines and reading our script, and that was definitely not the case.
Well, once you got a few shows in the can, there was going to be some mutual jokes you were talking about and some jargon. You would say, we're going to keep an eye on it, and he would say something else. The bumpers, I really like the bumpers. In fact, I think, obviously a lot of it came also from No Agenda, which you probably have heard of. If not the show, then about the show, because I know Fab was
He was a big fan. Yeah. I know about the show. I've heard a couple of them, but I don't know. I haven't heard loads.
I think a lot of the, let's call it, because I use a very loose format, and I always have the opening, which I think you also did, like some sort of a short clip, then the opening music, and then the opening of the show, which is always, I still can't find a better way to start a show myself, easing the audience in with something a bit humoristic, like 10 seconds, the music. Then you would, hello, this is who we are, and this is what we're going to do. And the thing is, and we're going to leave Linux Outlaws here for a moment, because what happened, and this was a big shocker for me, I was off the grid, so to speak, for a few months, I think just about 2014. And I was like, and so basically I didn't, for medical reasons, but I didn't listen to any podcast. I wasn't even following anything that happened. So once I resurfaced, I was like, okay, let's download and see what the guys are up to. And well, they just...
Yeah, we finished at the end of 2014, yeah.
Exactly. And I was like, oh, why? So... I'm not going to ask you why, because obviously that was well documented. And are the episodes still online? Can somebody go back and listen to them? Do you know?
Yeah, so that's something that I get asked all the time, and the answer is they are around. So it's, I don't know. You see, Fab has got them.
If I was Fab, you will hear now that.
Yeah, he has got them, but we did have. Actually, I may do that. I'm going to do that myself. I'm going to check now and see where they are online. My keyboard's not as loud. We used to have. If you went to, I think. So he's moved things between servers, and he keeps telling me he means to put them on the new server, but I don't think they're actually on there yet. They might be on archive.com.
I don't.
Oh no. So you used to be able to. You can't anymore. You used to be able to go to old.linuxoutlaws.com, and they were there, and they're not there anymore. So I think. If we go to, let me have a look on sixgun.org. The idea was to build an archive, and I don't think it's actually, no, it's not on there at the moment. So my answer would be pester Fab about that, but because he's
yeah, I should probably.
But lots of people want the archive, and I think there's still loads of stuff out there. I'm going to look on archive.org actually, because I think quite a few people made. Now you're getting the full experience. You're hearing me typing as well.
That's the Linux. That's the Linux Outlaws.
That's the way. Yeah. So let me look up Linux Outlaws on archive.org, and we'll see what we've got.
Nice.
I think. Oh yeah. Okay. So there's there's 48 episodes or 48 things. on Linux Outlaws, if you look up.
Okay, I'll search
it's
it
not.
up.
But there really should be. I think, to be honest, and it's easy for me to say this because I don't have to do it. Don't have to do the work. But it would be really nice to just have a page at least with a big list of all the episodes, just links to them,
right?
That people could.
How many were there when you finished? About 4.
There's 370 episodes.
Oh, 370.
Yeah, but it's
I
a
was
lot of
thinking
episodes.
420. Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, I'm on. This is like I'm on 100 and something, 3, 4, and it took me like 3 years, almost 3 years, 2.5. So yeah, I know it's a big effort. So the question is not why was it ended, but okay, so you ended something that you've been invested in for about 7 years, let's say, of your
Yeah, it
life.
was about 7 or 8 years. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean invested. You would joke about you have no life because of the show, and you have to spend all your free time because there is a recording, there is editing. Every time you hear something, you will write, "Oh, I take it to the show," and all of a sudden, and you would do other things, Red Hole Radio, and you started doing Floss, and all of a sudden, you decided to call it quits. So what happens on the day after, the metaphorical day after? How does it feel to all of a sudden, get your life is now yours? Now what do we do?
Yeah, it's a good question actually. I'm trying to remember now. It's a few years ago. I mean, it certainly suddenly it felt like I had a lot more time to do other things, which was nice. I was busy doing. I mean, I had a new job at the time, and I was quite busy with that. So it was good to have a bit of time to outside of work. And there was music going on and stuff. And there was also, as you say, I mean, Floss. I kept doing. I'm still doing Floss now. Floss occasionally, in my case, rather than Floss Weekly. But yeah, it's still happening, and I don't know. I mean, it was interesting to have more time. I can't remember what I actually did at the time. Maybe I had a holiday or something. Maybe I just took time off. But then you see things like Og Camp was still going, and other things that kept me busy, I suppose. So Rat Hole Radio was there, and everything as well.
All right, and Red Hole Radio is also no longer with us, I think.
Yeah, that one that was a shame because you mentioned about like finishing the show properly.
Right,
and
that one petered out.
That one So what happened with that one was it would have been I never planned to stop doing that, and then people keep asking me when I'm going to start doing it again, but it feels like it's been. I don't know. I'm not sure whether I want to start doing it again. I think now that it has been, off for 4 years, maybe something else would be the thing to do. But what happened was in 2015, it would have been. So you mentioned yourself that you were offline for like health reasons. I ended up in hospital, and the show obviously had to stop at that point because I was in hospital. And then for like a year or so, I had quite a lot of problems with different surgeries and so on, which didn't help. And I did post a show saying to people, "Look, this is the final show." I think I did post saying, I think I probably said, I'll be off for a while and I'll be back later. And then I never actually got back, which is a shame. But that one kind of petered out, I suppose, in that way. But that was. I don't know. That was possibly as much work as, although it didn't seem like it, it was probably as much work as Linux Outlaws. Because the thing with Rat Hole Radio was fine because I didn't play the same music again. Like if I played a song by an artist, I didn't try usually not to repeat it. So I had to find new things each time. So I'd have to find it was only every 2 weeks the show, but then it would still involve a few hours of trying to put together enough songs to make a show and make sure that it was up to standard. So it probably took a day or so, half a day at least of work to get that out every couple of weeks.
Yeah, and it also turned you listening to music from a hobby to a sort of a profession. You became like, you couldn't just lay back and listen to music. You were just like, is this good for the show? Is this good for the show?
Yeah, I did always make a note of things like that. So if I heard something that I thought would be good, I would make a note of it on my phone or whatever. Again, actually, I mean, I'm really not here to advertise Google Docs in any way, but I did used to just drop things into, say, Google Docs or something like that, and then I could pick them up later on, which was nice and easy. So that was good. But the other thing I was doing at the time, and still do now to some degree, was I started editing the software. Well, it was called the Software Freedom Law Show originally. So I started editing a podcast for Bradley and Karen, who now run the Software Freedom Conservancy. And they're still going, Free As in Freedom.
Yeah. Oh, it is. I actually, this is something I probably listened to them, and they went on some sort of a hiatus.
They were off for a long time, yeah.
Yeah, and I never went back. So they're back. That's fine. They're
nice. Back, yeah.
I like them. I mean, that's what's the thing. So you had Linux Outlaws, and you had Six Gun, Red Hole Radio, and those two, Free as in Freedom. It was all part of a community that you created, and even there was this Ubuntu podcast. Am I correct?
Yeah, Ubuntu UK.
Something.
Yeah.
Ubuntu UK, which also was, but I wasn't listening to it because I was like, man, this is too much.
Too many podcasts. Yeah.
No, it's too much. It felt like, all I do is listen to you guys.
Yeah,
Sometimes I stuck to the hardcore stuff. But is the legacy still going? You said OggCamp is still going on, and and I'm sure people ask you all the time, when are you going to come back? You got you two or whatever.
Well,
because I know Fab is still doing his thing.
Yeah, well, so Fab went and got a job with Heiser in Germany, the media organization, and started doing stuff there on security mostly. Which is why you probably noticed towards the end of Linux Outlaws we had a lot more security stories than we'd had in the past.
And his rants became much more focused.
Yeah, because I
told him that because he was used to start thinking about what he was saying. Which made it both better and worse, I would say.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, it did change a little bit, and then it would have been that. I mean, he did that for years. So I think only maybe this year, earlier in the year, or at the start of the year, he left that job to do freelance stuff. So he started doing more podcasts again now, which was interesting. And we did do for a while, and it's still going. I mean, it's faded out a little bit at the moment because, I don't know, we've been busy or we haven't done an episode recently. But we started doing a show called Hollywood Outlaws for a while. Which is about television stuff. It's about the TV show Bosch, which we both really like, which is a detective show. And we basically would talk about each episode. And I think the plan was to go through, there's 5 seasons now, and the plan was to go through each season and talk about each episode. And we did about 9 episodes or 10 episodes and we were just getting towards the end of season 1, and then for some reason I think he went off somewhere, or we got busy anyway, and then we stopped doing that. But that's going to come back at some point. So Hollywood Outlaws is still around. But he's still doing a lot of shows on sixgun.org. So you've got Geek News Radio, which he does with Dave and the others. That's still there, and I think there's some other shows on there as well. But he is doing a lot more now.
The question is. We said, okay, what happened on the day after? But let's say as you said, you had a community now. The community didn't just, vanish overnight. It probably, most people did go to other greener pastures, other podcasts or communities. Do you still keep people? I mean, I came to you because I was a member of that community. So, but do other people still remember the good old days, or is it just we all went separate ways?
There's still a lot of people who I speak to regularly who I met through Linux Outlaws, and are still. I would hope there are groups of people who know each other because they met through Linux Outlaws and things like that. In fact, I'm sure there are. I know there are. So one of the things you mentioned actually was OggCamp was the live event, conference that we started doing in 2009. So that kept going, and a lot of people that we met through that, a lot of people who listened to Linux Outlaws and the Ubuntu podcasts and other things used to come to that, and it was like an annual get-together for everyone. Everyone who could make it, which was great, and people came from America, and a couple of people came from Australia, which is a really long way, and I was amazed by that. So it was great to see these people come over, but that kept going, and that's still going now. I wasn't involved for a couple of years because, again, due to the kind of health business, I dropped off everything really, and I just didn't do anything for about 2 or 3 years really. But I got involved again this year. So this year is our 10th anniversary of OggCamp. So it's 10 years of OggCamp, and we've got an event. Yeah, we've got an event coming up in October, in 19th and 20th of October, in Manchester in the UK. which is really easy to get to for people. As a, you know, if you can, it's got a good international airport if anybody fancies a trip, and or if you're nearer, then you know, of course, you can get there that way as well. But it's going to be a big celebration, hopefully, of the 10 years, and Fab will be there. He tells me he's going to be there. I believe he's booked his flights or whatever. I'll be there, and there's a lot of people who are going to be there who used to be involved. In fact, speaking of community and the Linux Outlaws community, so some of the music that we use, quite a few of the tunes, the kind of little things that we used to play between the sections, we'd get sent by listeners, and Joe Ressington used to send us stuff. He sent us
the guy who did the Apple thing, I think.
Yeah, he did the Crapple one. He did.
I always thought that was your voice, you know.
No, it wasn't. No, that was Joe. So Joe did quite a few things, like musical things for us, and he's involved in OggCamp. He's one of the OggCamp organisers, and he's gone on to do his own podcast. He does like Late Night Linux, and he does some stuff with the Jupiter Media guys, and so he's like a full-time podcaster now, which is great. I saw him at OggCamp last year when I managed to get back there for the first time, and he's become like a full-time podcaster, and I was made up for him, really pleased for him, and so the whole kind of community is still there. But I mean, it's nice that we'll get to do our 10-year celebration at OggCamp, and I can't promise, but you know, people have been asking, because I'm going to be there. I'll definitely be there, and Fab's supposed to be there, so people have asked, will we do some kind of show? So we might do some kind of live show. I don't know.
Bring the band all together.
Yeah, exactly. Get the band back together. Yeah. So you never know. It's possible. I mean, there will be panels and things there that I'm sure we'll both be involved in, but maybe we can book one of the rooms and, you know, do a half hour or an hour get together. I don't know what we'll talk about. We could talk about what we've been doing in the last 5 years since the show ended. Maybe
precisely.
That would fill some time.
That will fill up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So if people want to,
let's go back.
Sorry, go on. I was just going to say, if people want to come to OggCamp, or you want to know more, I've got to do my advertising bit now. Sorry, but if people want to if people do want to come, then oggcamp.org, oggcamp.org, oggcamp.org is the website, and you can find out all about it on there, basically.
So we talk. How did you start with podcasting? And again, not you know, history wise, but more like, why did you?
Why?
Why did you start? What drew you to this new thing? I don't even know what to call it. Is it a media?
Media, medium. I don't know. Well, that's interesting, actually. I mean, it would have been 2007, 12 years ago, roughly. So I started. So before I did Linux Outlaws, I did some other shows with friends that I met online, and friends from all over the world. We had people from Australia and America and Poland, Germany. Fab was on from Germany, other places. What happened was, the reason I started it, I think, was because I'd started listening to podcasts around, not that long before, about 2006 maybe. I started listening to podcasts, which had been around for 2 or 3 years, or at least maybe 4 years at the time. It's quite funny. I hear people now talk about, I was there at the start of, not me personally, but you'll hear them say, I started at the start of podcasting. I was like one of the original podcasters, and you find out that they started in 2007, maybe, like when we did. And we were not at all the original podcasters. We definitely had, you know, other people to look up to. Like you mentioned, No Agenda. I mean, Adam. You know, he's the Podfather. He's the Podfather, and he's there since like 2000 or something crazy.
He invented the thing.
Yeah, so that was all there. So that was all going. But why? I think just because it was fun, really. I mean, I met some friends online. We used to. I was at home a lot at the time, and I started talking to people online. It wasn't something I'd really done before, which sounds odd, but I hadn't really had that kind of social experience of being on. Well, social media as it is now didn't exist then. Which probably, I don't know, you can debate whether that's a good or a bad thing, to be honest. But like, it felt new, and it felt like it was like something that not everyone knew about. And I met like other people like Fab and other friends online who are still some of my best friends today, and we used to just talk about stuff. And then one day I said, why don't we just do this on Skype? You know, we could talk on Skype for like an hour or whatever we want, and I'll record it. And it all just kind of came about organically, and we used to just talk about silly stories that we'd seen on the news and various different things online, and record it. and then just I learnt from there about putting it out. But I don't think I didn't actually have a plan to get into podcasting or anything else. It just kind of happened, really. I was looking for a way to, I suppose. It was fortunate for me because it fit really well with my kind of skills, if you like. So I was good at audio, and I was good at computing. I knew about computers, and so that kind of fit together. It was a way that I could mix my kind of audio knowledge, and I already had a studio with microphones in it and stuff from doing music stuff, so that was nice and easy. And then it was just doing the kind of internet side of it really worked. But as it went on, I think it just became the reason it kind of kept going, I think, was because it was fun to do, really. I mean, that was the main thing. I didn't do it for it wasn't like I was trying to make a job out of it, or I was trying to make a career out of it or anything, which is probably just as well, because that was really hard to do. It still is really hard to do.
Well, I know. I'm on a Facebook group, and people occasionally come in and says, what's the best thing to start to monetize the podcast? And I'm like, don't start one. That's the best thing. Save your money.
Things have changed a bit now, though. I mean, you're right. I mean, it's not a way to get rich. I would definitely say that. But things have changed a bit now. I do wonder sometimes what it would have been like if back then when we'd started, things like Patreon had existed, and these things that people use now, where it's becoming more common that people are using, like artists, particularly of all kinds, are using things like Patreon to kind of get a subscription in. We looked at it.
Right. Yeah, you did get donations. That's another thing I remember, and which wasn't. I remember listening to No Agenda, and they were really. I mean, they were listener sponsored from the get-go, or at least very early on, and I remember that I was listening to them without really understanding, and I'm like, what are they doing for a living? And it dawned on me, this is what they do for a living. And I'm like, again, we're talking like 10 years ago. And I was like, how? And then I noticed they were starting to say they have those sections in the middle where people would say, this guy gave us $100 and this guy gave us $200. And I'm like, so people pay them to basically sit at home, read the news, do the podcast. I was like, man, that's weird.
Yeah.
But you were also getting donations. Well, not in the hundreds of dollars or thousands, but you were getting some money. Let's say.
Yeah, we got
keep
money.
The servers going.
I was just going to say, yeah, we did, and that was great because it meant that. I mean, I don't know. Fab would be the one to ask about this because he used to pay the server bill and get the donations. So I don't know if they covered the donation, if the donations covered the server bill.
No, that's what you would say. You keep the servers running.
So that was basically what we used to do, was spend it on things like that. And we did have. I did have ideas over the years for things like I really wanted to have like some kind of store or something where we could have things like, you know, T-shirts and mugs and merchandise stuff, but we never quite kind of really got there with that. We tried a few different things, and I think it was a lot more difficult then for whatever reason. It's not even that long ago. You're only talking like 10 years ago or 12 years ago, but it wasn't as easy to kind of get your stuff online and sell it as it is now. But we did have, I mean, I talked about this on the show, but we had offers of sponsorship from companies that I don't even think they were offering. I can't remember how much money they were offering, really, to be honest, if there even was a figure. But we had things like GoDaddy at the time, which we've talked about before. GoDaddy contacted us and said, you know, we'd like to sponsor the show, and then they gave us a list of things that we had to say. I said, well, we'd like to think about it first, you know, and then discuss it and whatever. And you did hear other shows, you would hear them read out like a big long scripted advert that GoDaddy had given them, and you know, each to their own. I certainly don't criticize them for that, but we kind of at the time you mentioned the community before. I mean, we went to the community and said, in the forum, we had this little, we didn't even say what it was about, but we had this little post on our forum that just said, what do people think about GoDaddy, and let us know your opinion on the company. Do you use them? Do you like them? And the feedback wasn't good. So I just we both decided very quickly that it wasn't worth attaching ourselves to something that our listeners didn't like, and you know, why would we do that? It didn't make a lot of sense. So we didn't do that. But no, we never went down that route, I suppose. But it was different back then. It was definitely a lot more tricky than it was. We looked at subscriptions at the time. The only thing you could do was like a subscription, like set up some kind of subscription button through PayPal, and we talked about that, but it didn't really work. But people used to do it all the time. So Leo on Twitter, he had a subscription, listener subscription thing at the time. He was quite early on that, so it was possible. But no, we never quite went down that route.
All right. So speaking of Leo, all of us, sudden, I mean, we as we've established, you were an outlaw. You were doing this for fun. You were doing this, shooting the breeze, and the format is there to keep you honest, and not the other way around. And all of a sudden, you get, I mean, you can get at that time, you can get more professional than Twit. Today, you have all those big studios and stuff, but
Yeah.
Back then, Twit was like all of a sudden, you it's like in Wayne's World when they go from the basement to the network. So how did it feel, or did it feel different? Was it different to all of a sudden, doing the big show?
Yeah, it was definitely different. I was so nervous the first time I did it. I mean, really, really nervous. You could tell probably if you watched it, if you listened to the show. I haven't listened to it back, but I do remember doing that first show. And being incredibly nervous and scared of like talking to all these people, because I mean they had a much bigger. Well, actually no, I was going to say they had a much bigger audience, but at the time they probably didn't, because we had quite a big audience on the next Outlaws, but we never really thought about it. But it was the whole live video thing was different. We didn't really do that at the time, so you felt like you had to look presentable, which I hadn't had to worry about. The reason I like radio stuff and audio stuff is that you don't have to worry about making sure that you look good, or that you don't have to be on camera. You can relax more. So it was a lot different. And they had, when I first did it, it was, I came in not that long after Leo stopped doing it, actually. So I've never done a show with Leo. That would have been really interesting. I came in after John O'Bacon, who he left, and then I came in after him. I basically just wrote to them and said, if you're looking for another host, let me know. So I kind of volunteered to do it. I wrote to Randall because I knew Randall anyway. I knew Randall a bit anyway. He'd been on our show, and I'd met him, somewhere. I met him at a conference and stuff. Although we didn't know each other very well. And I knew Jono really well. So I wrote to Jono and said, because I was a bit worried that it might look bad because he was leaving for various reasons, because he had other stuff to do. And I thought it might look bad if I'm just jumping into Dead Man's shoes a bit here and going, oh, I'll have that. Because it might look a bit too opportunistic. But I basically wrote to Jono an email and said, do you mind if I, put myself forward for this? And he said, no, of course not. Just see what they say. He said, ask them and good luck. So I said, okay. And I did. And I wrote to Randall and said, if you need another host, then, let me know. And he was really nice. And we got on there pretty quickly. But it was, it's different. It's definitely a different vibe. So there's all kinds of rules. It is very much more like network. You can't swear. You can't say certain things. You have the sponsors. You have to make sure that you don't say anything about the sponsors that they didn't like, and stuff like that. So it's definitely different.
And you also, and again, I say for some reason, because at the time it was, obviously, if Randall can't do it, I mean, then you become the host.
Yeah.
So were you surprised when they asked you, or was it always like you were going to be the chief chief host? I don't know, chief guest host or whatever.
Yeah. That happened. I think probably about 2 years after I started doing the co-host thing. It was mainly one. I don't even remember how it first happened. I think I remember we were doing a show, or we were scheduled to do a show, and Randall for some reason couldn't make it at the last minute, so I was left to do the show on my own with like the two guests. Luckily there were two guests on that show, so they could talk back and forth a bit as well, and I ended up having to just kind of really just make it up and fill in, and that's happened a lot. So that's become a bit more kind of formal, I suppose. In fact, just this week, I hosted a show on Wednesday, where I was the main host, and that's nice. It's always fun to do that. It is different. That's a lot more stressful, I think. Being the co-host now is really easy because you don't have to worry about, have I said the right, have I said all the things I'm supposed to say? Have I done this? Have I done that? Have I, made sure that I've mentioned the URL for this? Have I told the guests that? You don't have to worry about any of that when you're the co-host. You just kind of sit there and you're the wing man or whatever. Whereas with the other thing, it's a bit different, and you have to do stuff like get the adverts out the way, get those done, all those kind of things. It's definitely different, but it was nice to do, and it's still nice to do it. I've done it quite recently. I've done it quite a lot recently. In the last month, I've done it like 3 times.
And when you started doing it, and then again for me it was because I knew you as a host, as a co-host. It was obvious that okay, I can do it. Today, in hindsight, it's a bit like oh my God! You didn't just get to play in the big leagues. They made you a head striker. First single striker or whatever.
That's
I
true.
don't even know football. I don't even know football enough to.
Well, striker, that's leading the line, attacking
exactly.
line.
Captain,
it was interesting.
They made you captain.
Captain, that's true. And so this week you were talking about whether you'd be called like lead co-host or what. I made a joke on the show this week about. I always call myself like the substitute teacher or the whatever, everybody's experienced that when you go to school and the teacher's off and then there's some other person there. I always felt a bit like that. But then this week I was just saying this has happened quite so much lately that I don't feel like I should be the substitute teacher anymore. I feel like I should upgrade my status, to which I think Randall, he was around in the chat room. He posted something like, what does he call it now? I can't remember what he said, but I put down like maybe vice president in charge of hosting or something, vice president for hosting or lead assistant. Head of assistant hosting.
Both Linux Outlaws and FLOSS Weekly are very much into open source. And here is a deep secret question, you have to bare your heart. Are you really into this, or is it just something this is my thing?
Into open source, you mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I could have talked about it that much for as long if I hadn't actually been into it and interested in it. I mean, to some degree, I think, with Linux Outlaws particularly, 372-hour shows. It's a lot of time to spend talking about something. The reason we started doing Linux Outlaws was because at the time it wasn't as common for people to use Linux as it is now, and part of the reason it was called Linux Outlaws was because we seemed to be like outlaws a little bit in that we would using something that other people weren't. And I got really into open source software and free software and all of that. In about 2002 or something like that, I started using Linux, and then eventually I got by 2006 I was using it as my main desktop, and I still do now. I'm talking to you now on a Linux Mint desktop that I've got, and I actually think to me it's important because I understand it's a tricky subject because some people are very religiously kind of they won't use anything that's not free software or not open source because they won't even use the term open source because they think it should be called free software, and you've got all these various different groups within. I think it's just, I try and promote that way of working. I think it's better, and I compare it to when occasionally I do talks where people ask me to come and talk about what open source is and why they should care. And I always say, I've done a few talks to say students and people who are trying to get, into computing as like a career. And I always say to them, well, if you think about it as, if you're into science, if you think about science and how science works, if I'm I don't know, say a biologist or something, and I make some discovery, I have to make it possible for you to recreate that. You have to be able to peer review. You have the whole peer review thing. So I have to publish everything that I've done in a way that other people who are my peers or whatever, or anyone, can look at it and say, okay, that works, and then this doesn't, and then it gets proven. And it's like the scientific method, whereas doing stuff with like proprietary software, you create your own thing and you put it in this little box and you don't let anyone look at it, and you just say, trust me, this is brilliant, and this is fantastic, and you just have to bet on how great I am, and then try and kind of get them to buy into it. Whereas I've always wanted to know how things work. I think partly that's why I mean, it must be curiosity, but you can't give me a thing in a black box and go, don't open it. It's just use it. Don't open it. You don't want to know how it works. Well, I do want to know how it works, unfortunately. And that's the great thing about open source and Linux and all of these things. And also I worked on the web a lot. I mean, I was doing web development stuff, and that was always, with Linux servers, a lot of it. And it was, the philosophy was the same. You could always look at the code for a website. You couldn't maybe see the server-side code, but you could see their HTML and stuff and see how they were doing certain things. And it pushed that philosophy. So I always try and push it to people as a way of working. I still do that now. I still advocate for open source in various different ways, and not just in technology as well. I've tried to push Creative Commons and for art and other things that people do.
Yeah, I mean, Creative Commons was for me a big revelation. And in fact, I don't think we would be able to do all the things we do without open source. So we have, I mean, as podcasters, we have a vested interest in this.
Yeah.
Did you do any hosting with Simon Phipps?
Yeah, I've seen Simon quite. Simon's involved in OdCamp. He's on our board of organisers, or he's on our OdCamp organising board. Yeah.
Did you come up with the concept of channeling Simon?
I think that might have been Randall. It might have been Randall. I don't know, but that's become...
I remember one of the first, because I listened to FLOSS Weekly since episode 1. I mean, technically since episode I think just when they moved from Chris to Randall, and then I went back and listened to the first 20, so I can call it from episode 1. And I do remember the first time he Hulk went Incredible Hulk on one of the guests who championed the open core, and I was like, oh man, they should give him a show. This was I could, and he's one of the, I always say he's one of the good guys. I like his passion. I mean, okay, Stallman is a beacon, and you always, every time you say he's too much, he's too radical, and like 2 years later you goes, man, he was right.
Yeah.
Every time he kept. Yeah, but Simon is one of those people who is not, this prophet on a hill. He's in the trenches, and he also is always. So I mean, I maybe I will try to have a talk with him if he would not go Incredible Hulk on me.
I'm sure he wouldn't. No, I mean, I think the way I always describe it to people is. I mean, I've got a massive respect for RMS, for Richard Stallman. I mean, he kind of. Well, he did, create this whole movement, and okay, it's changed names over the years, and people argue over different things. But I think you need, even if you don't necessarily agree with everything he says, you need somebody to be the kind of outlier, to be the as you said, the beacon is a good way of describing him. You need somebody to be at one extreme of the scale so that we can balance it out, because there are plenty of people at the other end of the scale. So we need Richard to be at one end of the scale, and he's still doing it after all these years, and there are various people in different, appear in different areas in that scale. I think it's good that we have someone who is still so passionate and still inspires people.
So where can we find you these days? Do you have your own podcast? You said Hollywood Outlaws, and is there anything you actually do now to channel your creativity, so to speak?
Yeah, so I got back into podcasting. So after I had the kind of long period off of about 2 or 3 years, funnily enough, FLOSS Weekly was one of the first things that I did again after that time off.
Right.
That was I have to thank Randall for that. He was very keen for me to come back on, and he kept in touch with me, and he kept emailing me every few months and saying, how are you feeling? Do you want to do some stuff? And that was really nice. So I got back onto that, and that was good because I didn't have to think about the organising the show and all that. I could just go on and be the co-host, and that was a nice way back into it. But since then, we started doing Hollywood Outlaws last year, and then at the minute I do a podcast about kind of. So one of the big things that I've always been into, along with computing and open source and all that kind of stuff, is the kind of I don't know. Now it's kind of cool to be geeky. I don't know.
Yeah.
Years ago, there used to be. It wasn't cool to be geeky, and I don't know. And now even the whole nerd thing is really popular. So I would definitely say I'm both, probably a geek and a nerd. But I'm a real kind of comic book nerd and TV, movie, film nerd, all those kind of things, as well as music and other things. So I do a show about all those things, really, like books and a lot of TV and films and stuff, called Tales of the Unattested, with a friend of mine, Caroline, who's the co-host, and we do that every couple of weeks. It's at unattested.club. And I was really proud of the name. I came up with the name, and I was really proud of it. And the reason was that I wanted to do a show about comic books, and we both discovered that we were massively into comic books, or that each other were massively into comic books. And we started having these discussions that people do. I mean, people who are into these things, as you know, you always have these silly discussions like who would win between like the Hulk and say Superman, who would win in a fight between the Hulk and say Superman.
I would probably ask you. I don't know about Alan Moore and Grant Morrison rather than Hulk and Superman.
Yeah.
Oh man, we're gonna have to do another one. I didn't even know this. We're gonna have to do another one.
Yeah. Well, they're both massive heroes of mine, Grant Morrison and
yeah,
Alan
exactly.
Moore.
I mean,
and
you're
Garth
British.
Ennis.
Yeah, you're British, so it's probably a pride moment for you to know that the greatest comic writer of all time is I don't even know where Northampton is.
I've been there. It's about 3 hours from Liverpool. I've been to Northampton a few times. A friend of mine used to live there. He went to university in Northampton, and he said that he used to see Alan Moore around the town. Like, he was quite famous for. I mean, he would walk around in his big outfits.
We're gonna have to do another interview about comics. I didn't even know that.
Yeah,
but so sadly we are out of time. So I will definitely put a link to that.
Yeah.
And
if people want to know anything, they just go to Dan Lynch, danlynch.org, and it's all there. It's dead easy.
Cool. That would be your thing. Okay. Now, one thing before I give you your final two questions, and. Because there's two things I hate in podcasting, and I always like to rant. So so two things. The first one is when people say thank you for having me, and I'm like, unless you're my mother, I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm not a native speaker, but that's the immediate connotation, like coming to my mother and say thank you for having me.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's thing. And the second thing is something you guys do is like. Is there anything you wanted to talk that we haven't covered, which is driving me nuts? So I'm not going to ask you that. But the fun thing is on FLOSS Weekly, you ask people two questions. Randall asked them for whatever reason, and you are very religiously following that. And do you really get emails if you forget to ask? Because he keeps joking. I get emails if I don't ask.
I think he does, yeah. I mean, I don't get them, but I think Randall does get emails, yeah. I mean, because his address is on the show.
And do he like badger you on IRC, ask the questions, or is this something you wrote down? Don't forget to ask the question.
Yeah, Randall always. So he always wants us to do it, and people do ask sometimes. So just on the last show I hosted this week, Randall turned up in the chat room and he was saying, "Don't forget the final two questions." So people do
obviously.
Ask. Yeah.
Obviously, because he would get Pearl for an answer on both.
Yeah, you're right. He was very keen on that one because he knew he was going to get an answer that he liked.
So I'm not going to ask you what's your favorite scripting language and your favorite text editor, but I am going to ask you what is your favorite podcast?
Wow, what to listen to? You mean?
Yeah, obviously. Not the one you're...
Yeah. This would be the opportunity to name another podcast of mine. So at the minute, it changes. So much like lots of things, it changes. At the moment, I've got to say my favorite podcast is one called Wrestle Me, which is I got Fab into this as well, and some other people. It's by two British guys who one of them, they talk about wrestling and old style, American wrestling and stuff, but not in a very serious way. So they tell you the stories behind the scenes, which are incredible because it's got a lot more professional now. So as wrestling's become like a proper normal like entertainment thing now, it's fairly it's not boring, but there's not as much stuff. Back in the old days, the guys were fighting backstage, they were getting arrested, they were they were all kinds of things going on that they tell you about on Wrestle Me. So I would say definitely that's one of the funniest shows I've heard in a long time. And they talk about some really, really interesting stuff on there.
Were you a Big Daddy fan or at the time? Or
I was into Hulk Hogan and all that stuff. Yeah.
Oh,
so,
man, weird.
I mean, in the early 90s, I got really into wrestling when I was at school. I was probably of the age where I think we saw it on satellite TV when we first got satellite TV over here. We used to start getting things like WrestleMania, and I got really into that, and I liked like Macho Man, Randy Savage, all those kind of crazy characters that they had back then.
Oh, yeah.
That's the one.
Anyway, yeah. Okay. And the second question, not what is your favorite text editor, but what is your favorite instrument? And it can be anything. It could be a musical instrument, an audio, whatever. What is your favorite instrument for expressing yourself?
It'd probably have to be the guitar still, I think. For me,
What type of guitar do you play?
So I've got I've